Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers here on the East Coast of the United States of America. It is 6:30 p.m. Welcome to Campaign for America. I'm with John McCann tonight, and we're going to be speaking about critical issues that will certainly involve you as we move forward into the year 2022. And John, I want to thank you for being on board tonight. And as usual, I'm sure our viewers appreciate your input.
Thanks, Steve. How are you today? How are you tonight?
Well, I'm doing fine, John. I've been doing a number of TV hits over the past week. In fact, One American News last night, Newsmax tomorrow, Fox during the week. So we've been addressing a lot of issues that seem to be taking the back seat in the mainstream media, John, because of the distractions that we're having. But I want to get to one of those issues that the American people and our viewers need to really keep a close eye on. Folks, we've been, John and I and others here at Campaign for America, for at least a year, have been assessing that Russia will in fact invade Ukraine. And in the meantime, we also suggested along the way that there was a possibility that China would invade Taiwan. The emphasis that was placing was that the United States of America should not be dragged into a war by the Biden administration that we simply cannot win. Now, people are asking me, John, what do I base this on? What do I base this conclusion on? Well, my entire career in the Navy was with the Office of Naval Intelligence. I have a lot of contacts, have a lot of friends and colleagues, if you will, who assessed the geopolitical makeup of the world. We looked at, and I could tell you, folks, I studied what was called the Soviet Union's order of battle. Order of battle means exactly what type of equipment they have in the event that they need to fight a war. Well, the Soviet Union disappeared, but their military might did not. And now that's in the hands of Vladimir Putin. So, John, here's where we are right now with regard to Ukraine, at least my assessment, and I'm sure the assessment of others. Vladimir Putin had a meeting with Joe Biden via Zoom, I believe it was yesterday. And Joe Biden comes out and says, well, I had this discussion with Putin. I kind of put it to him. We'll be talking to NATO, and then we'll talk further. The story has always been, and the story that has always been has been lost, was the fact that the Obama administration had made a move to include Ukraine as part of NATO. And Obama made a point to let Vladimir Putin know that that would be off the table during Obama's reelection, that there would be no move to make Ukraine part of NATO. So at that point in time, Vladimir Putin backed off. He wasn't going to go past the Crimea. There was no suggestion at all that the Russians would go into Ukraine. Obama's gone. Trump comes in. Trump holds the line. And he puts it to Vladimir Putin very clearly, don't cross the line. Putin respects power, not weakness. Now, President Trump is out of office. Now we have the weakest president known in the history of the United States in office. And Vladimir Putin has made it very clear to Joe Biden, you just try, you just attempt to make Ukraine part of NATO, and you'll see what happens. And I remember, John, a few weeks ago, Putin was in that microphone saying, Joe, do you hear me? Are you listening? Well, the answer, John, is 175,000 Russian troops as we speak at the Ukrainian border. And now we hear that the tanks are beginning to roll from the northern part of Russia towards the Russian-Ukrainian border. So, John, you tell me. I know you're not an intelligence analyst, etc., but you're a pretty smart fellow. So you tell me what kind of message is Vladimir Putin sending Joe Biden? Is the message, as Joe says, well, don't worry about it, he's not going to invade? Or is it, Joe, you're watching?
Steve, I don't think it's the idea that the message that Putin is sending Biden. I think it's the other way around. It's the message Biden not just sent to Putin, but sent to the world when we had the debacle in Afghanistan. That debacle, although limited to Afghanistan, was a signal to the world that this particular president didn't know what he was doing. I mean, there isn't any person, this has got nothing to do with partisanship. There isn't any person in geopolitical, whether they're political scientists, serious people, whether it's military intelligence, that looks at what we did in Afghanistan is anything but a disaster for American leadership. And you and I both know, as most people do now, when it concerns weakness and when America is weak is when human suffering rises across the planet. And the last time, remember, this is not the first dance with President Biden. When Biden was vice president with Obama in 2014, what did Putin do? He went into Ukraine. So, pulling out of Afghanistan wasn't just a message sent to the world vis-a-vis Russia. It was I apologize. It was a message sent to the world that America is not in a position of strength right now strictly because of the leadership. I'll leave the military assessment to you, but the politics is pretty clear. Putin needs Ukraine. He needs it to be destabilized, because if Ukraine should become stable, okay, and start to drift towards the West, that can mean the end of his rule in Russia itself. You know that from your study of military history. This problem that's being created is, one, American weakness, and two, the longstanding history that Ukraine and the threat that Ukraine poses to the existing Russian state as we know it today.
Now, folks, think about this. Vladimir Putin does not want Ukraine as part of NATO for what reason? Well, he answered the question. He said he does not want U.S. troops on the Ukrainian-Russian border. Would you like, and this is what is reported that he told Joe Biden some time ago. In fact, he probably even told Obama this. Would you like to see Russian military troops on the Mexican-U.S. border? Well, I certainly don't want Russian troops on our border. And he does not want American troops on his border. Now, folks, the problem we're facing is this. NATO is certainly going to tell Joe Biden to some degree, Joe, don't worry, we got your back. Except there's a problem. The problem, John, number one, is that Joe Biden allowed that NORAD fuel line, oil stream line running from Russia to Germany and France. He allowed to open it up. Trump had it closed down. He wouldn't allow it to happen. Well, now the Russians are sending fuel, folks, energy into France, a NATO country, and Germany, a NATO country. Think about this. Think about the French and the Germans right now having a conversation with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden saying, hey, look, you have our backs. And John, what do you think Vladimir Putin's going to do? Don't you think he's going to turn the energy tap off and they're in trouble?
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated. I'm not sure that the fuel is actually flowing right now. I was told early this morning that there's been some administrative holdup to the spigot being actually turned on, that it's technically not turned on yet, and that the Biden administration is trying to use that technical holdup as leverage over Putin. But the fact of the matter is they committed to opening it while they closed the pipeline in the U.S. And quite frankly, that was inexplicable. No one from the Biden administration has articulated the reason why they've done it that makes any political sense whatsoever, unless there's things behind the scenes that you and I don't understand. So having said that, Steve, the bigger problem here is that Putin himself sees Ukraine as necessary for his survival in the Russian state. Because if Ukraine should go become NATO or westernized right on his border, that poses a huge threat. And the very Russian people that he is now in charge of may not tolerate his heavy-handedness for much longer. That's really the heart of this. What's driving that. Now, keep in mind one other thing, if I may, Steve. The Ukraine is not in the same position that they were in 2014. They are much stronger militarily than they were in the surprise attack and that led up to the 2014 invasion of Crimea. So I think the Biden administration is gambling that since 2014, the Ukrainian people have been self-motivated. They're united today better than they ever have been against Russia, because the person that was opposed back then was a friend of the Soviets, the president.
John, keep in mind that the Biden administration said that about Afghanistan. Don't worry. We're going to pull out. They're strong. They're not 20 years ago. They're today, and they collapse in 24 hours. But to your point, yeah, they may be a little stronger. But the issue, John, is this, and this is what, and everyone you watching, please, I'd like you to share this part of our broadcast because it's going to affect you. The fact of the matter is, folks, I'm asking all of you out there right now, which one of you, any one of you, Democrat, Republican, whoever you are you now willing to send your sons and daughters to fight a bloody war in Ukraine against the Russian military? John, I go back to 1962. I go back to the time when Nikita Khrushchev threatened to put missiles in Cuba. We were on the edge of nuclear war. But thank God some level heads got together, and Kennedy and Khrushchev were able to prevent that. But the other problem is Vietnam. I was in the Air Force during Vietnam, didn't go to Vietnam, but I was in the military, knew exactly what was going on. There's something called mission creep. John, we sent advisors. Advisors went to a little bit more than advisors, and then we have 50,000 young Americans killed in action. Fighting a war we could not win. I'm a hawk, all right? I'm a warrior. I believe in military might that is so strong that not a nation on earth would touch us. We're not there anymore, John. And the problem we're facing is this. Now you're going to have, and I continue to say that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. There's no question in my mind. I believe it's going to happen in 2022, maybe January, maybe February, but it's going to happen. And John, to your point, you bring up a very good point. If for no other reason, for Putin's political survival, he's got to do this. And he's got to do it because now he really laid his cards on the table. So now, John, we invade Ukraine. American troops, are they going to be the first ones in like Vietnam? Are they going to be the first ones in like World War II? NATO, Germany, France, England, they're not going to send their troops in. So are you willing, folks? That's why I'm asking you to keep an eye on this closely. Are you willing to see your sons and daughters go to war? And believe me, John, I don't believe we have enough manpower now or enough training now to fight a bloody war in Ukraine, which means, here you go, John, and you can weigh in on this, which means they will have to reinstitute the draft if we're going to end up in a prolonged war. John, it's yours.
Well, you and I talked about the draft last summer, Steve, when they started to float the idea that females had to sign up for the selective service system at 18. That was troubling to me and you at the time because that meant something. This is a big lead up. I want to say it this way. I don't think President Biden has the intestinal fortitude to send our troops to Ukraine. So I don't believe that that's even in the cards. I don't even think that's possible. I think from the American perspective, we need to keep whether or not the Ukraine poses a strategic advantage or a threat to NATO. In relative terms, no, because at one time, Ukraine was part of the Soviet bloc. Strategically, I don't see it as a relatively important country to America. Although morally, I understand it's part of our mission creep of swallowing up the Eastern Bloc into creating democracies under those countries and maybe putting an end to Putin after all. That's the American political goal. But the bigger problem, Steve, you and I talk about it all the time. It's the strategitic importance of Ukraine. Let's compare that to the strategic importance of Taiwan. Taiwan means something on the map. Taiwan, as it relates to American hegemonic power and freedom in the world. Taiwan is if the Chinese take Taiwan, that is an existential threat to America's survival. Now, I read this week that the Chinese are looking to put a naval base in the Atlantic. Okay, so as we're looking over here, okay, on the Western Hemisphere, the Southeast Asia is becoming more and more destabilized with very aggressive moves by China, flying into Taiwan's airspace. Russia is, to me, and the Ukraine issue is a distraction. I understand what Putin's doing. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with slaughtering people. I don't agree with war. But from a geopolitical perspective, I get what he's doing, and I think the Americans do too. I hope, okay, because I don't want Americans, my daughters or my friends' sons fighting over there, and I really don't think that's in the cards under this president. I don't think this president knows how to use American power. All he's done while he's for his years in the Senate and as vice president is single-handedly demilitarize our own military. Now, when he became president, what did he start doing? He introduced all this woke crap into the military. So
Well, think about this, John. You
I'm just
brought up
worried
China,
about-
but before I get to China, so let's say Putin invades Ukraine and gets away with it.
Mhm.
Who's next? Georgia? Who's next? You see the domino effect. Now, you bring up a very good point. So now here you're President Xi of China, right, folks? Listen to this. You're sitting back and you're watching all this unfold. Sooner or later, you're going to see Russian troops go into Ukraine. And folks, if there is a war with Ukraine and Russia, John is right. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be bad. There's going to be a lot of loss of life. And John, to your point, maybe Putin doesn't want that. But saying that, whose blood, whose treasure? So now you're sitting in your loft at the Communist Chinese Party headquarters watching this take place. And as John said, folks, hasn't been widely publicized, so maybe this is the first you're hearing it. The Chinese are looking to build a military base in the Atlantic, folks, in Africa. That's the Atlantic, folks, that's our East Coast, okay? So they want to build a military base there. And no doubt in my mind, they've already started with regard to at least drawing up some schematics or plans. But what is even more chilling is that the Chinese Communist Party has built mock-ups, models, life-size models of our carrier groups that would be responding to the South China Sea in the event that they would invade China and we would respond. Now, John, during World War II, Yamamoto did that. He had the Japanese military build mock-ups of our carrier groups. And what did they do? They floated those mock-ups in the South China Sea, and they had bombing runs on them. They blew them right out of the water. They used those mock-ups as practice runs to destroy, back during World War II, our carrier task force groups, and now China's doing the same thing. In addition to that, as John said, China is flying these sortie missions of their fighter jets pretty close to Taiwanese airspace. And in addition to that, which probably, John, is more chilling than anything else, is that the Chinese military are actually holding mock invasions on their own coastline of Chinese troops landing, doing beach landings, practicing what I believe will eventually be the island of Taiwan. So I go back to this question, John, and I'll ask you this as I ask you to answer this as I ask the people listening. Are you willing to send your sons and your daughters to fight a bloody war against the Chinese in Taiwan? To your point, John, there is a national security interest to the United States. But do we, after Vietnam, and I've spoken to a number of veterans about this, and before I share with you, John, what they said, I'll ask you and the people this. Do you believe the American people today in 2021 have the will, the strength to fight a bloody war in Taiwan against a powerful, powerful Chinese military?
Well, history teaches us about America. And prior to World War II, America had no taste to enter into the war in the South Pacific, or neither did they want to enter the war in Europe. In fact, the American position officially we were neutral. So the American public, regardless of its leadership, generally we're pacifists. But it's when our national interests and our sovereignty gets threatened is when the American people heed the call to action. You have to couple that with this particular president. Whether or not the American people will be willing to do it, no. Today, I don't see the American people motivated to do anything like that. But you need a leader that needs to bring the people along and express and explain what the national security interest to the United States is. We've never seen a threat like China before in the history of our country. China's history was always that of one big nation, but they kept to themselves through most of their long, rich history, through the different dynasties. But the technology that they've had, they built the wall. They invented so many contributions to human society, but they were relatively geared towards internal nationalism. Chinese communists are a different animal. Communists themselves preach global hegemonic power, where one world, one government under communist rule needs to exist. And what's troubling about the American public today is that I don't think our teenagers even know what communism is. I don't think it's taught in school. In fact, it's taught in school, but it's used as an indoctrination approach to promote things like critical race theory and things of that nonsense like that. But I don't think the American people have the stomach for it right now. My big fear is that we don't have a leader to bring them along and explain, and we don't have people in a culture that even understands the threat of communism. And that, to me, Steve, is very troubling. I want to ask you a question, Steve. Somebody was asking me about all the political stuff going on in America, and the president of Nike saying we're a Chinese-centric company, and all these American corporations that have partnered with the Chinese communists. You realize when you're a business in China, you have to be a partner of a Chinese nationalist who is a communist. Okay, so there's no getting around that. So if you're wearing Nike gear, you're supporting Chinese communism. Okay, that's fine. Okay, you don't realize that as an American. But let me ask you, do you believe that there is a soft surrender to China right now through the Biden administration? Do you believe that some people in the Pentagon may have done the math? 1.5 billion people, we cannot beat them, and therefore it's a slow surrender. Tucker Carlson on an Australian program last week threw that idea out there, and I've been thinking about that for a long time. What do you think of that question? What do you think?
Yes, I believe there's been a rapid surrender. Just recently, as 48 hours ago, apparently there was an NBA basketball player who condemned the Chinese Communist Party, and the NBA was begging him to knock it off. Knock it off. Here's what I believe, John. There's been a surrender, but that doesn't mean that we have to continue to surrender every bit of our sovereignty, whether it be economically or militarily. You see that picture behind me, John? Do you know who that is? Who is it, John? Ronald Reagan. Folks, I believe that we get a leader like Ronald Reagan who can dig deep into the spirit of the American people, we can bring China to its knees. It's as simple as that. The manufacturing in this country could be rebuilt. Our military needs to be rebuilt. We could do a lot of damage to China. But John, you nailed it. And some of the people who are now chatting here on a chat room, we need a leader. We need leaders who are going to stand up and under no uncertain terms make sure that countries like China, and especially the Chinese Communist Party, is going to be taken care of. Now, let me add one more thing, John, about this before we go on to our next subject. When we talk about leadership and we talk about beating the Chinese Communist Party and beating communism, not only do we need a national leader, we need leaders on the school board level. We need leaders in city government. We need leaders who are going to stand up on every level of government and say, as Reagan did, enough is enough, even leaders in our unions. Which leads me to this, John. Segue right into our next topic. You're a lawyer, so I'm going to defer to you on this because I'm getting a lot of emails, a lot of calls about this. Mayor de Blasio, who to me is no longer a socialist, he has clearly made it clear to me that he's a communist. He decides to make it absolutely sure that private sector workers, private, John, not public, who do not get a vaccine are going to be fired. They're going to lose their jobs. Where in America, in our lifetime, have we ever seen any mandate like this other than in Beijing or in some communist country somewhere on this globe?
Well, Steve, by all accounts, I did a little research on that. It affects, in New York City, 184,000 companies. I just want to say that number again. In New York City, his mandate affects 184,000 companies. And some of the biggest companies in America, Cantor Fitzgerald, J.P. Morgan, Google, they're all affected by this. They all have their own internal vaccine mandates or mandating for testing and things of that nature. Most of them have something like that. There's only 11% of the corporations in New York City that do not require any vaccines or proof of vaccinations. But we have to understand where this is coming from. This is never going to be actualized. First of all, he said it'll take effect, I believe, December 27th or 28th.
7th, yeah.
Yeah, he's out of office on January 1st. Okay, Mr. Adams comes in and gets sworn in. Mr. Adams has already put out a public statement and said, oh, he's going to review this very carefully and closely. But if you wanted to kill jobs in New York City, that's how to do it, right? So what he's proposing here has got nothing to do with reality. This is what I call the politics of the Worldwide Federation Wrestling Championships. It's not real. This is about Mayor de Blasio wanting to put a resume bullet point. So when he runs for governor in the Democratic primary, he has to run to the left and get all the AOC people, get all those woke votes for the Democratic primary. And he wants to say, I put the strongest vaccine mandate in U.S. history in place. And he wants those votes for the Democrat. He wants to be governor of New York. And this is his path. It may, in addition, Steve, raise questions. I saw a report 2 days ago that Bill Gates has put almost $500 million into the United States media companies through some sort of grants, advertisement dollars. I mean, that's a lot of money. And he, of course, is one of the owners of Moderna. So the American media, Bill Gates, they may be involved in supporting this guy and he's seeking their financial support in that run for governor of New York. If he's to become governor of New York, he will make the governor of California look like a capitalist.
Well, John, Lisa, thank you, Lisa. She just informed us and has the link that a judge in Manhattan has blocked that mandate right now. So hopefully it'll be overturned.
Yeah, it's a temporary.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you. And I saw that it's a temporary block, Steve, until the attorneys return. I think very early next week to brief the topic. Look, if you're asking me as a lawyer, is this enforceable? I highly doubt it. But you don't know because the judges in New York are elected, right? Going back to when we wanted to open up the gyms in New York, we went to the most Republican county we can find in the state of New York. We had as you know, we went through that here in New Jersey with the gyms closed with my clients. Okay. But we went to the most Republican county we can find. And that Republican judge opened up the gyms for the state of New York because he was elected and he was listening to his constituents. But this mandate's going nowhere. I don't think if Adams tries to maintain it, he would lose support of all these corporations. And I don't think he has any intentions of doing that.
All right, John. So let's go to the Midwest. I believe the state's Illinois, maybe another state. Please forgive me if it's not. But I was on the air today discussing that there are probably some companies, insurance companies, that may be refusing to cover unvaccinated people's medical bills. John, now we're talking private sector. And this is a fear that a lot of people have had, that they're going to wake up one day and their insurance companies are going to tell them, look, we will cover you so long as you are vaccinated. But if you don't have a vaccination, we are not going to cover your medical costs. You're a lawyer. What's this all about?
Yeah, that's not going to fly either, Steve. The bottom line is the insurance companies can only put in reasonable restrictions. Okay. And if they are going to say we're not going to cover your cancer treatment because you didn't get vaccinated. We've seen that in some of the hospitals as it related to transplant patients. They wouldn't perform transplants, people who required heart transplants were kicked off the list. Insurance companies are a little different. They have to make themselves accessible equally under the law. And I think it's a dumb move in the insurance companies. What it is doing, though, it's going to require people to file an enormous amount of appeals. And those appeals are filed in the state capitals of the state. In this case, you're talking about Illinois. And so the Department of Insurance and Banking in Illinois is going to get overrun with complaints. And it's forcing the people to get lawyers and spend money. But if you think about it for a second, what does one have anything to do with the other? What is getting cancer? What is coming down with tuberculosis? What does any of that have to do with the fact that you're protected against right now really a very bad flu virus? Because
Well,
essentially the death rate. The death rate, okay, on that now is worse than the flu. Not much. Not much.
and I've said, yeah, and I've said it nationally, that this is no longer a public health discussion. This is a political survival discussion, which
So
leads me back.
it's a
Money. That's right.
financial.
Money. Which leads me back to New Jersey. We have a lot of New Jersey residents tuning in tonight. And unfortunately, and we warned them, Governor Murphy and his team have decided to once again increase the tolls on the New Jersey Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway. People can no longer afford, John, with the gas price increases, toll increase, tax increases, on and on and on. So the question that I get continuously asked, and we need to talk about this a little bit, how do we address this? How do we make change? And folks, I've said over and over and over again, we've got to throw every single Democrat out of office, every single one of them, who are not going to stand, and I don't see any right now speaking out against this, Democrats that is, whether it be here in New Jersey or across the country, anyone in office who's not standing on the principles of our Constitution. Which leads me to this, John, and here's where I want to have a little bit of a discussion with you. We have Republicans that continuously go after other Republicans, whether it's name calling, whether it's denigration, whatever. They're continuously attacking fellow Republicans because these Republicans that they're attacking are moderates. They don't toe the line, if you will, the way that some extremists, and I will call it as it is, that some extremists are calling. And the pity of it is that the Democrats are sitting back and they're watching the Republican Party, particularly here in New Jersey, commit political suicide. And so what I'm encouraging people to do is, folks, it's time to move on. It's time to start assessing where we are as a party here in New Jersey, and I would assume in every other state, and decide what's good for this state, what's good for the other 49 states, and what's good for America. We have important congressional races coming up across the country, particularly here in New Jersey. John, contrary to maybe the pollsters, I truly believe that we could flip a lot of congressional seats here in New Jersey. But the only way it's going to happen is if Republicans start using their heads and thinking, well, maybe we need to sit down and discuss policies moving forward with who's ever a Republican standing on the Constitution. Maybe people have a little bit of a different approach to these policies, but all in all, John, it's better than communists in office.
Steve, communists are the enemies. The problem is you have Benedict Arnold's in your own party, and you know where I sit on the name calling. I don't think it's productive. It's a big party. We're going to have disagreements. And I talk about politics all the time. Think about it sitting down with your wife, and then years later you have children, and then the disagreements. But you want them to be your children still, and you still want them. You still want to be married, hopefully. Okay. Otherwise, so you have to learn. We have to learn as Republicans to be more like Democrats in that regard, and that is follow a plan and stick to it, and stop attacking each other. But having said that, Steve, the idea of flipping congressional seats in New Jersey. I have to disagree with you on that, because who is the head of our party? He is a big pharma guy. So Big Pharma is also one of the top employers in the state of New Jersey. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican in these congressional districts, and I can tell you, I was a candidate, okay, and I know I'm not saying I wasn't approached or I was approached, but I understand why I was opposed, okay, and so those interests are powerful. And so we have the head of the Republican Party in the state of New Jersey, who's a big pharma guy. I don't know what his real goals are or not. All I know is I haven't seen any leadership. All I do is get emails and they talk a game, but I don't see any action. What did the Republicans do this week? They got into we're going to come into the Capitol without showing vaccination cards, and That's political theater. That's not real action. I don't
Well,
see one.
let's,
I haven't seen one bill proposed from any of the assembly people on the Republican side to stop these mandates that are coming. Not one.
well, let's talk about that for a minute regarding the New Jersey GOP, because we're here, and it may be, it may be something like that happening here over the country. I agree with you, John. The New Jersey GOP, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not talking about the chair people; they work hard. I'm talking about the top line of the New Jersey GOP, whether it be the chairman, his staff, who's ever in charge up there. Nobody knows who's in charge. It's dead. It doesn't exist. All I receive is emails. You want to go to a party, $5,000. You want to go here, $2,000. They've lost touch. They have lost touch with the grassroots Americans in this state. They haven't been out there. They haven't been on the streets like us. They haven't been talking to minorities like we have. It's a party of exclusiveness, not inclusiveness. And I'm saying that, folks, because I can say that. John's saying it because he can say that. We're looking for nothing but what's right for this country. So here's my point, John. We've got close to 45,000 people that we are connected with, maybe now closer to 50,000 that we're connected through our social media platforms. And I did a little analysis, and I got to say, I think 72% maybe are New Jersey residents. So we have a lot of sway. We have a lot of influence. I know that. And what I'm hearing from them is that, look, they're not looking for third-party issues. They know that that's a failure. But they're looking to take control of what? The narrative. They're looking to take control of the party without being involved in the party. In other words, as one woman said to me last week, let the branch of the New Jersey GOP wither and die. Don't pay attention to it. Don't water it. Don't feed it. I understand they're broke. They're begging for money, and it's the same old story. And John, I'm glad you mentioned it. This week, I got another letter, come to a Christmas party, but it's going to cost you A, B, and C. How about a nice party for the little guy? Something affordable for the little guy. But you see, the little guy don't count when it comes to the New Jersey GOP. That little guy counts with the chair people. A lot of fine chairmen and chairwomen in this state, but not many of them could speak like the way we do. And I get it, and John, you get it, and we don't even have to go down that road. But here's what we're asking people to do here in New Jersey, and think about doing it in your state. Come together, grassroots people, come together, seek out organizations that are truly looking out for your benefit. There are a lot of them. Campaign for America is one. John's got you're president of the Oakland municipal GOP up there, John. I see grassroots people there. I don't see career politicians there. And there are a lot around the state here in New Jersey. We got to seek them out. And if there is none, John, I dare to say, if there is none, then why don't you step up, folks? You step up. Your neighbor step up. Form a group. It takes a group of 5 or 6 and bingo. John, I understand you had a group that was collapsing and you gave it rebirth. Is that true?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was collapsing because the prior president was killing it on purpose because he wanted to keep control of the local government for himself. And that's just an opinion. That's not a fact. But so we rebuilt it, and we invited you, and others came. Jack Ciattarelli came. Interestingly enough, at the time, the current state chair was a Senate candidate, and he didn't come. So, and in fact, Steve, just this year, we recruited 2 new people, volunteers, that were new to the party to run for office. That's what we need. Government, when you sit on a council or a school board, and if you're doing it for the right reasons, when you're done with your 3 or 6, if you do 3 years and then do another 3 years, you're done. You're done after that. It's real work, and it should be and it is really basically, if you're doing it for your community, volunteer work. What happens is occasionally, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, there are people who go, "Oh, I can make money at this," and that gets exposed shortly thereafter. But no, we've turned it around here. We haven't had a meeting since COVID. And we're going to be having our first one in January. In fact, I was going to be talking to you about that privately. But I see here someone said, "Why don't we guys?" We have run, and we have run, both of us, partially successful and unsuccessful. We won primaries and lost primaries in lost races. The idea is citizens government. I can help. I can advise. I'm pretty good at running campaigns, and I know you are too. But it's time. It's not just people like us. It's people who are shooting us these text messages. People who send me emails. In America, anyone can run for office, but that's going to change, Steve, if Biden has his way. And this money that he sent to all these left-wing constituents like Black Lives Matter and promoting this crazy racism. They want to redefine the term racist to mean all white people are. This is what they say. This isn't me saying it. Kendi's book, Bob Kendi's book, How Not to Be a Racist, says, unless you are being an anti-racist, you're a racist. I don't know what that means.
Well,
I mean, but my point is, Steve, we need people to step up. School boards, we're seeing it. We're seeing some of it. We've seen some of that action happen. We saw it in Oakland, as I said, with 2 new candidates, professional people. They're going to be great councilmen, but it's a political process and there's a learning curve. So
well, let me follow up on that. Yes, I did run for office. I ran for school board and won. I ran for city council here in Nutley, won twice, walked away, I believe in term limits, ran for governor, lost the primary. Am I going to run again? Somebody asked at some point in time. Well, let's put it this way, folks. Never say never. You'll have to stand by on that. But getting back to what you said, John, you're right. And I'm always asked this question. People are willing to step up. They want to volunteer, but there are no leaders. So here's what, John, you just said it great. Folks, we are 2 leaders within the political process that do have a lot of influence and have a good following. So we're stepping up. And we're offering you, no matter what state you're in, we're going to offer you some help. And we're not charging anybody. We're not looking for money. We're just looking for what's right for the country. You want to run for office? You want to get involved? You want to be a volunteer? You see that red banner under our faces there? It says campaignforamerica.com. Go to our website and just go to contact form and fill out that form simply with your name and your email. Simple as that. Maybe your phone number if you want. And that's it. And send it off to us. And then we will be in touch with you. Just put in the narrative that you're interested in volunteering or interested in running for office wherever you are. I've said this over and over again. We have a young lady in Nutley who started a group about a year ago. She had only a few people. And now, John, they've got a social media platform, I think, with 400 residents on it. And you were at one of the meetings, John, where we've had a packed house. So it can be done. Without what? Without some leader on a throne who we've never seen and who's never come to our neighborhoods. It can be done. John's been running. He ran for office. The cleanest campaigns you would ever want to see. A credit to our party and a credit to the country. And that's what we do, folks. So no matter what state you're in, we've got contacts all over the country. You just get in touch with us. One more thing. See the guy behind me, Ronald Reagan? I got another picture way over there of Abe Lincoln. Today, in 2021, John, they would be called names by people of our own party. They would be called rhinos. They would be called every name, traitor, every name under the book, in the book by 2021 standards. And in their time, and you know this, John, because you know your history, I know you do, in their time, they were called names. They were called every name under the book, and they ended up being the best presidents this nation ever had. So I think to the point, folks, that we've been trying to bring up tonight, think about what we shared. Keep an eye on Russia. Keep an eye on China. Hug your children. Love them. But listen, I mean this. One of the failures of pre-Vietnam War was the lack of the public paying attention and getting involved the way they should have. And John, as you know, it was during the Vietnam War, the cities began to burn. There was destruction all over the country. And the end result was us not losing the war. Our troops won the war, but the politicians surrendered. Not our troops, but politicians. John, last word.
Steve, I'm becoming increasingly pessimistic and optimistic at the same time, if that's even possible. It takes one news report, one piece of information that brings out those sharp emotions in me, one way or the other. But I will say this: in this country, anyone, if I could be a sitting councilman for 9 years and run for Congress, anyone can. Okay. And that's what I want to do. I want to help use this platform to encourage other people to run. We can't, two people can't do it. It takes literally a movement, okay, to do it. And if you're not going to stand up to what's going on in your schools and stand up for your children, I don't know what you would fight for. Okay, because what's going on in the school systems, particularly here in New Jersey and on the East Coast and these other states, is going to be ultimately the end of America. Somebody mentioned in the chat room that the young people don't know what communists are, and we talked about that earlier tonight, and that is a problem. And they are a threat. Let's stay focused. Let everyone be thankful that we live in the freest country in the world, that we could still have this platform to talk about what we're talking about.
I could have not said it any better, John. Thank you very much. So, folks, there it is. Campaign, the number 4America.com. One click, one person stepping up can not only change your community, but may change the country. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. I'll be on from time to time with a quick 1-minute message. And again, email us, go to our page, our website, and drop us a little note. Thanks so much. God bless you. God bless America. And always remember, no matter how dark the days get, no matter how tough the storm is, there's a God above. There is a God above who has the shadow of his wings over our country. But there's a scripture that says this, folks: you receive not because you ask not. Let's get used to asking God for his guidance, for his wisdom, his understanding, and his divine protection. Good night, and God bless you all.